Being anti-fascist myself, it concerned me to see people being treated this way, and so I looked into the context of what I was seeing. The protesters are outside the ultra-nationalist People's Party of Canada's rally, which this couple are attending. This detail seems to be missing from the caption at the bottom left of the screen of the video. During this protest, 4 people were arrested, and all 4 of these people are in that clip. Alice Smith, one of the protest organisers, said this about the altercation: "The majority of demonstrators managed to express themselves without harassing old ladies. I have never seen the people blocking the woman before last night," Smith told CBC Hamilton. "If I had been there at that spot, at that moment, I would have stepped in to stop it, because that wasn't what we were there for." As there was minimal other instances of problems at this protest, it shows this clip was used as nothing more than an appeal to emotion. However, mistakes happen, so let's take a look at the rest of the video.
Tolerance. It's a word we hear a lot these days, so let's define it. Tolerance is the ability to live with people whose opinions and behavior you don't agree with. That's essentially how Oxford defines it, how Merriam-Webster defines it, and how we as a society have always defined it.
Defining terms is a good way to start. However, I find it easier to grasp concepts when they are in writing. So here's what Oxford says: "The quality of being willing to accept or tolerate somebody or something, especially opinions or behaviour that you may not agree with, or people who are not like you." And Merriam-Webster says, "Sympathy or indulgence for beliefs or practices differing from or conflicting with one's own. The act of allowing something." In the interest of clarity, let's look at what the opposite, intolerance, actually means. Oxford says, "The fact of not being willing to accept ideas or ways of behaving that are different from your own." Merriam-Webster isn't that helpful. It says the quality or state of being intolerant. So we'll have to take a look at what intolerant means. Unable or unwilling to endure. Unwilling to grant equal freedom of expression, especially in religious matters. Unwilling to grant or share social, political, or professional rights. These definitions are roughly as Dave explains them. However, now we need to decide how society uses these words. Thankfully, Merriam-Webster has given us examples on how they are used. A tolerance for other lifestyles, and intolerant of people who callously deny others the very rights they take for granted.
You might be for the death penalty and your cousin might be against it. You might be against a $15 minimum wage and your coworker might be for it. Your dad might have voted for Trump, your mom might have voted for Clinton, and your brother may not have voted at all. Whatever differences we have, tolerating others' opinions is a prerequisite to a functioning and free society.
Respecting that other people are entitled to their opinions is one thing. People acting on those opinions to restrict the rights of others is something different altogether. Using the example you used of voting, the left generally run on a platform which encourages people to go out and vote, attempting to make it easier for people's voices to be heard at elections. The right, however, try to limit voter turnout and reasonable representation with tactics such as gerrymandering, where constituency boundaries are manipulated to make a favourable outcome more likely. With these methods, the right wing is denying the rights of the people, which is as seen in the usage of intolerant.
America itself was built on a foundation of tolerance. The Declaration of Independence guarantees us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there's an implicit contract there. To have your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness, you have to be tolerant of somebody else's life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness.
In your own life, you are free to pursue those things to your heart's content. No one is saying you can't, that is, until your actions start to impact on another person. Refusing to allow people to live their life with liberty and the pursuit of happiness is intolerant. For example, not allowing homosexual people the right to marry the person they love just because you don't like it is intolerant. This position is usually held by the right, whereas typically the left is for the right for homosexual people to marry as they please.
This contract, though, seems to be breaking down. If you listen to the mainstream media, only one side is living up to this deal: the left. The right, according to the media, is intolerant of everyone, except those darned white heterosexual Christian males.
The narrative Dave is trying to build is, simply put, a straw man of reality. Anyone who tries to force people to live their lives or reject an aspect of themselves based on their own opinions ought to be challenged. For example, no one should be forced to pray to a god they don't believe in, whether it be Yahweh, Allah, Vishnu, Odin, or Osiris. And by this same measure, no one should be stopped from praying to their chosen deity either. However, this is what the right often tries to force into secular areas such as schools and government, which is meant to serve everyone.
There's only one problem: it's just not true. Incredibly, the left isn't even tolerant of the very people they say they're tolerant of. If you're gay or black or an immigrant and you're not in lockstep with current leftist orthodoxy, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
The left generally won't criticize these people based on these attributes, though they may based on something they say or do that is harmful to other people. The level of projection at this point is high. It is the right-leaning bakers that want the right to refuse service because the potential customer is gay. It is the right-leaning voters that believe it is just that perceived immigrants can be indiscriminately rounded up by federal agents to face deportation irrespective of their citizenship status in the USA. It is right-leaning people that don't see police brutality against people of colour as a problem.
If you believe we should judge people on the content of their character and not the color of their skin, the left calls you racist.
The only example I have been able to find of someone being called a racist for referencing Dr. King is when someone also used the N-word, and not only the passage shown here. As Dave hasn't provided a citation for this claim, I am left to believe this is what he is referring to, and in this context understandable that they were called racist.
If you believe that America is a nation of immigrants, but that our country should also protect its borders, the left calls you a xenophobe.
It's not inherently xenophobic to be concerned about border security. However, the lack of empathy for those fleeing persecution, just like the first European settlers were, is an indication of underlying problems. And when the experiences of immigrants that have gained entry is included, then it becomes a pattern of behaviour with many people on the right.
If you believe that men and women are equal but fundamentally different, the left calls you sexist.
If men, women, and non-binary people were treated equally, this wouldn't be as much of an issue. However, they aren't. The gender pay gap is a real issue, as is inequality in the home and workplace in general. When traditional gender roles are being forced upon people, even children, society should stand up and say no, let them choose for themselves.
Here's the thing: those who only tolerate people they agree with or like aren't actually tolerant. So who is tolerant? Is it the organizers of the Women's March who had to apologize for the hurt and confusion they caused when they invited a man, leftist icon Bernie Sanders, to speak at their convention?
This convention was established to give women a voice. Instead of promoting prominent women, they asked a man to speak for them. Essentially, this was the antithesis of the intent of this convention. Can you really say that you're surprised they weren't happy?
Is it the Antifa thugs who caused UC Berkeley to spend $600,000 on security when mainstream conservative Ben Shapiro showed up to give a talk?
You mean the protest that resulted in no violence and only 9 arrests? To quote Margot Bennett of the UC Berkeley police, "For the most part it was an orderly event, attended by respectful, orderly people," she said. "The crowd in the street was loud, but not violent." Ben Shapiro did speak at this event, exercising his freedom of speech. The protesters also expressed their freedom of speech. Insinuating violence and vandalism in this way is just dishonest of you, and again, you didn't supply any citations, so we can't fact check to gain any more context of your claims.
Or is it Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters who scolded Kanye West for talking out of turn when he dared suggest that blacks should think for themselves.
Here's what Congresswoman Waters actually said to Politico. Kanye West is a very creative young man who has presented some of the most revolutionary material in the African American community. But we also think that sometimes Kanye West talks out of turn, and perhaps sometimes he needs some assistance in helping him to formulate some of his thoughts. We don't think he actually means to do any harm, but we're not sure he really understands the impact of what he's saying at the time that he's saying it and how that wears on particularly the African American community and for young people in general, and I think maybe he should think twice about politics and maybe not have so much to say. Although this is a scathing response from Congresswoman Waters, it is far from instant dismissal and is a considered response to the actions of Kanye West. As for your claim about what Kanye West said, again no citation, and I can't find any quote where he said that before the quote from Maxine Waters was published on 1st of May 2018.
These aren't isolated examples. I'm guessing that you, person watching this right now, have silenced yourself because you don't want to suffer the wrath of the outrage mob.
Based on the fear-mongering and misrepresentation of events you have provided so far, anyone, including those that are on the left, could say yes.
So let me ask the question again. Who is tolerant? Well, here's the surprise. It's actually those scary right-wingers that the media and the universities demonize every day. I speak from personal experience. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment here, but I still consider myself a liberal. And it's my duty as a liberal to say what I think. I would rather stand for what I believe and be hated than bow down and be loved. The left, sadly, has become utterly intolerant of anyone with whom they disagree. Why?
Dave, I'm glad you've asked that question. Tolerance is an ideal we should all strive for. However, when faced with unchecked intolerance, callously denying the very rights they take for granted, tolerance ceases to exist. As Rubin says in Resolving the Paradox of Tolerance, on the one hand, this commitment suggests that we should accept that others who do not share our values are equally free to voice and promote their own beliefs, even when they are preaching intolerance. On the other hand, tolerating the intolerant might turn out to be unwise and even self-destructive, as giving free rein to political forces that promote inequality and discrimination might lead to the subversion of our open and tolerant society. So given that it's the right that is trying to restrict and remove the rights of other people, it is the left that is reacting to intolerance and not instigating it.
Because they believe that they know how you should live and how you should think. Any deviation, any nonconformity is dangerous to that goal.
It is the right that wants to make laws dictating how you can and cannot live your life. The left says, for example, if you don't want to marry someone of the same sex as yourself, then don't. Just don't stop me from doing it too.
Believe it or not, the right these days actually welcomes diversity of thought. I can tell you that in the last few years of my political evolution, I've consistently found conservatives to be tolerant and open-minded.
I wonder how many conservatives that protest outside of Planned Parenthood centres have been open-minded enough to realise that these centres offer more than just access to abortions. Do they realise that they also provide HIV screening, cancer screening, including mammary and cervical cancer, LGBTQ plus services, and even men's health, including testicular and prostate cancer testing? And all these services are provided at a low cost and even free in some cases. Between the protesters and the conservative lawmakers, this invaluable medical non-profit is being forced to close its doors because of the narrow-minded right.
Don't take my word for it, though. Test it out for yourself. Go talk to some. They do exist, and they do things like watch movies, travel, and eat ethnic food. You know, regular people things. You know what I found out? The right, much more than the left, believes in the notion of live and let live. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the true definition of tolerance. I'm Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report for Prager University.
I think at this point it's obvious that I disagree with Dave about whether it's the left or right that is intolerant. But what do you think? Do you agree with Dave Rubin? Or maybe myself? Maybe you think we are both wrong. In any case, I'd like to know your thoughts in the comment section below. A link to the original video is in the description, as are links to my sources. In making this video, I had help with research from Mrs. Snarky and Godless Cranium. A huge thank you to them, and links to their channels are in the description below as well. Thanks for watching.